Hi, I'm Matthew Francis. Thank you for tuning in to Diversity Dignified. On this program, we address any issues that pertain to gender equality. And so tonight, I'm really honored to be interviewing Dr. Matthew Fox, who is here in Portland, Maine. He'll be speaking about ecological and gender justice. He is the author of 33 books with another on the way, and these books have been translated in 63 different languages. He's also the founder of the Fox Institute of Creation Spirituality, which is in California, with, I believe, another one on the way in Colorado. So without further ado, I will let him establish his own credentials, and we will just start. Dr. Fox, thank you so much for being here. Welcome. One thing I think viewers probably are aware that you are an ex-priest, that you were in the Dominican order for 34 years, I believe.
Right.
You were silenced by Pope Benedict in 1993 for sort of the resurrection of creation spirituality. And I kind of think that that was sort of ironically providential. And I'm sort of wondering maybe what you did during that time and how you kind of came around doing what you're doing.
Well, first of all, Matthew, thank you for having me on your program, and thank you for having a program like this. Yeah. I appreciate the journey you've been on. It's not been easy, but as you lay it out in your book, which I appreciated very much, it's a story of hope and of courage.
Thank you.
And I commend you for that. And the many valleys you've been through, I think, have clearly made you a stronger person and more, what should I say, endowed to be an instrument of compassion with others, because it begins at home, compassion does. So I just commend you for your own journey.
Thank you.
And for your recent book, which I truly profited from. As far as my own journey goes, yeah, it's had its bumps. I think everybody's journey has some bumps. I love the line from Joe Campbell, none of us lives the life we had intended.
Exactly.
So that makes life much more interesting.
Sure does.
But it does keep you on your toes too, doesn't it? So anyway, yes, I was silenced for a year by, actually it was under Pope John Paul II.
Okay.
But Ratzinger, who became Pope Benedict, was the instrument, he being the chief inquisitor, who John Paul II enabled. And you understand, they silenced 106 theologians in their 34-year papacies. I was just one of 106, so I have to be humble about that badge of honor. But first I was silenced for a year, and the objections to my work were first that I'm a feminist theologian, secondly that I call God Mother, though I proved that all the medieval mystics call God Mother, and that I prefer original blessing to original sin.
Huge.
Huge, and that I don't condemn gay people. That's pretty huge too, as
yes,
you know.
It is.
and that I work too closely with Native Americans. Those are the 5 objections or heresies, supposedly, that were laid on me. But yeah, I spent that year mostly traveling. I went to Latin America to see base communities and liberation theology in work, and I met people there who have been silenced, such as Leonardo Boff, a liberation theologian in Brazil, and Bishop Cassi de Galida, a wonderful bishop and poet and mystic and prophet in the Amazon, who was working with the leaders of the Amazon tribes and so forth to defend the rainforest and to defend the tribes. A wonderful and very holy man. So it was, in fact, the only sabbatical I've ever had in my life.
Oh my goodness.
But of course, it didn't give me any money or livelihood, because I was not allowed to teach or preach or write or anything. But fortunately, I got a grant, and I was able to survive that year. And when I came back, I spoke first at a called the Action Group to 2,000 people in Chicago. It's kind of a group of progressive Catholics. My opening line, which I received in a dream, was, as I was saying 14 months ago when I was so rudely interrupted, and people liked it, but not in the Vatican.
Oh, no.
And about 4 or 5 years later, they expelled me.
So what is so offensive about an original blessing? I mean,
well, that's a very good question. I would ask the same thing. But Western Christianity, since St. Augustine invented the idea of original sin, 4th century. It was the same century that the church inherited the empire. So if you're going to run an empire, original sin's a real good idea.
Sure, keep you in line.
Keep you in line and get you all confused about whether you have a right to be here or not.
Sure.
But Jesus never heard of original sin.
Right.
No Jews ever heard of original sin. And so I just pointed this out in my book, and it was not well received by not just the Vatican, but a number of right-wing Christians, because sin seems to be the way many Christians approach the person in the story of Jesus. But creation spirituality is very different. We begin with the original blessing, and that is to say that creation that brought us here, us meaning us humans, it has blessed us all these billions of years.
Yes.
And we know that scientifically now, but we also know it, our ancestors knew it, the Jews knew it. Look at Genesis 1. Everything's good, everything's good, everything's good. And when humans come along, it's a very good. Well, good is blessing is a word for goodness. So, but again, it's political. It's political that original sin has taken over the mindset of Western Christianity because it has served empires right up to today.
Shame and fear.
Shame and fear and guilt, and you don't have what it takes. I believe that the secular version of original sin is consumer capitalism.
Yes.
Because they're really saying the same thing. They're saying you don't have what it takes. You got to buy this. You got to get salvation from outside yourself.
Yeah, if you're not producing or consuming, you're not really worthwhile.
You don't really exist.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The young and the old experience that. And of course, those with handicaps, be they physical, mental, or something else. So, and then of course, also, original sin was never really defined by the church. It's just this vague thing. Now, for Augustine, it was about our sexuality. It really was. And that, of course, is pretty dangerous. But but it was left vague, and so I think that gay people come into the world and they pick up the message, oh, it's an original sin, it's a sin to be gay.
Yes.
Especially when that's what some churches are saying. Or transgender people, people of color in a racist society, women in a sexist society. So again, like I say, it's a way of keeping order, but it's not about freedom, it's not about grace, it's not about beauty, and it's not about empowerment.
Right, and it's collapsing. I mean, people don't want to feel horrible about themselves.
Imagine that.
Yeah, imagine that. Yeah.
I hope you're right. I hope it's collapsing. I mean, some people do. Adrienne Rich, the great feminist poet, says that many men have a fatalistic self-hatred. And when I look like at today's politics, I think there's a lot of fatalistic self-hatred. Why are all these politicians in denial about climate change instead of wanting to do something about it?
Right.
Might it be fatalistic self-hatred? That when you hate yourself, as Jesus pointed out, you can hate everyone else too, including the earth, including the elephants and the tigers and the whales and the rivers, everything that's dying with us. So I think there's some deep insight in Adrienne Rich's comment that. And I would add, I think original sin ideology, whether it comes from from Augustine in theology, or whether it comes from the secular world in consumer capitalism, both of them are feeding this idea of fatalistic self-hatred. Yeah. And Jesus said, you love others the way you love yourself. So he's presuming that we learn to love ourselves. Right. Well, good parenting and good, a healthy culture teaches people, and especially the young, to love themselves, to develop their unique gifts and all the rest.
You know, Dr. Fox, so in my book, I kind of start off were that I was really afraid of God. I didn't truly love him because I didn't know love, because the templates I had were very angry parents. And so I wonder if some of that is going on too. This is the templates we learn: original sin, self-hatred, and we project that on God.
Yes, and the punitive father.
Yeah.
Studies have been done on fundamentalism, and that keeps coming up. It's a punitive father,
Yes.
and a punitive father God.
Right.
And this is, of course, a reminder about why parenting, good parenting, is so important.
Yes.
But it's also a reminder about how good theology is important.
Yeah.
To be passing on generation after generation that God is essentially a punitive father who's judging you all the time, and has a special place called hell to throw you into because you're so imperfect. You know, it just goes on and on.
Yes.
It feeds a lot of sickness. And as you say, hopefully people are walking away from it. But in my opinion, they should be running away from it.
Yes.
And the sooner the better.
Yeah.
So my job, I guess, as a theologian for 40 years has been to try to clean that mess up theologically and ideologically. And of course, we have the assistance of psychology today and other sciences. And to say nothing of art and music, and you know, there's many ways to heal. And there's grief work to be done and the rest, and rituals. But we can't take it for granted that it's going to improve on its own, because I think the punitive father ideology, which is really behind all fascism too. Fascism is about putting order ahead of everything else, law and order. And life isn't like that. There's chaos in life.
Yes.
And there's creativity that can be born out of that chaos. And this is what we should be honoring, is creativity and rebirth.
And beauty.
And beauty and co-creation. St. Paul himself calls about our being co-creators. And that's very different from being a sinner with a capital S.
Well, the sinner, being a sinner, to me, is so debilitating. Because then you're just, I really developed a severe OCD trying to be pure.
What's OCD?
Be obsessive compulsive disorder. It was really trying to be clean, trying to be pure, and I would develop very elaborate cleansing rituals. And never could until finally I replaced this angry parent-father figure with a more loving paradigm. And I don't call God Father, but I know that the Aramaic translation is Mother, Father, Birther, Creator, Universe, and Spirit, which is a much more embracing, loving figurehead.
Exactly. And bringing in the gender balance when it comes to our names for divinity is very important. It's not a minor thing.
No.
So calling God Mother is important. And in fact, you know, Pope John Paul I, who was murdered after 1 month in the job, the day before he was murdered, he said this publicly. He said, God is both mother and father, but God is more mother than father at this time in history. Because patriarchy has been so oppressive for several centuries. And Meister Eckhart, the great 14th century mystic, who I've written a lot about, a wonderful man, also a Dominican, he said that all the names we give to God come from an understanding of ourselves. So if we're just passing on God as Father, much less punitive Father, or patriarchy, then we're revealing that our own souls are very unbalanced, and our institutions. And look around us to see how lacking in feminine energy and wisdom, for example, education is in our culture, to say nothing of politics and economics and the media and the rest. So bringing this balance back is an essential part of healing. And creating a society that's worthy of us and worthy of our children. Whether they be girls or boys, we all have to grow up knowing that we have qualities of the feminine and the masculine.
Right, the divine feminine, sacred
There
masculine.
you go, exactly.
Yes. You know, one thing, so I saw you not too long ago because I was at a retreat of yours over at Rowe Center, and I learned a lot about the sacred masculine, and I have to be honest that felt so refreshing, because it feels to me like masculinity has been this tyrannical way of being, and as a transgender person, it was really difficult for me to come to terms with being a male right now. I kind of felt like, well, women sleep with the enemy, I became the enemy. And it was really tough. And then, because I had been trying so hard to be hyper feminine, I went almost the other extreme of being very masculine. And now I feel like I have just this wonderful blend of both. And the other thing that I think that you wouldn't mind me bringing up is science and religion or people or faith are really coming back again, whereas I felt like it was very divided. But I would say in the last few years, at least to me, science is really backing a lot of what people of faith have been saying, like that we're interconnected and that both the masculine and feminine are just beautiful. And you said you don't condemn homosexuality. There's a lot of evidence in nature that exists.
Of course.
And that has been with us since the beginning of time.
They've counted 464 other species.
Yes.
Last I heard, that have gay and lesbian populations.
Absolutely.
So get over it.
And the same with gender. People don't realize this. You know, I was a kind of a fundamentalist, not quite a fundamentalist, but pretty conservative. And I needed to know this existed in nature. And you want to know what some of my research found was that it's all over the place. It's not just in plants and fish either. There was a movie, I saw it was on BBC, called something animals that were hiding, and basically it was two scientists from South Africa it started off, they were studying a pride of lions, and they thought they were studying male lions, and it turned out they were female lions. They had grown their manes out and they were behaving like males, and the world's sneakiest animals is the title of it. And it went on, and they were studying deer who were behaving, male deer that were behaving like female deer, and so it turns out there's this whole transgender thing going on in the natural world.
It's about diversity, isn't it?
Yes, I always say if God didn't like diversity, why'd he make so much of it?
Exactly,
So,
exactly.
yes.
And you know, most artists like diversity. Thomas Aquinas, the 13th century mystic and saint, he says, God is the artist of artists. And he says that, you know, no artist hates their work. The poet loves her poetry. The potter loves his pots. You know, the painter loves her paintings. How could God, who's the artist of everything, hate anything?
Right.
So diversity is how, you know, getting into the artist's mind is one way of understanding, I think, what the divine mind is really about. But you know, there's a story about homosexuality that I think I'd like to share with you.
Please do. Yeah.
A couple of years ago, I was lecturing in South Korea.
Okay.
They translated about a dozen of my books. And it was a very large hall, and it was packed, people sitting, standing in the corridor and everything. And it was 3 hours, it was a long afternoon, because of course I had a translator. After about each sentence or two, she would translate. The very last question, this young man stood up, and he said, I am gay, and I do not feel welcome in my church here in South Korea. And he sat down. Well, I launched into my shtick, and I said, well, first of all, my Bible says God is love. It doesn't say God is heterosexual love exclusively. That Native American leaders have told me that those who know the tradition know that all the great chiefs had gay people as their spiritual directors.
Yes.
And because they recognize that gay people carry a special gift of spirituality to a community. And then, of course, I talked about science, 464 other species, and 8% of any given human population can be gay, etc. And when I remember the last sentence that I spoke was something like, so if you live in a society of any kind that is homophobic and worships a homophobic deity, you're in trouble because you're destroying spiritual energy.
Yeah.
And with that I ended, and two things happened. My translator disappeared. Just boom, she went away. And the guy who had invited me, who led the whole afternoon, he came rushing up to me and he knocked over the lectern. He was, and I didn't know what I had done. And he said, "You've just dropped a bomb, you've just dropped a bomb. South Korea is the most homophobic culture in the world."
Okay.
But he said, "It's good, someone had to drop the bomb,
had to do
and
it.
it's better that it be you, someone from the outside." Well, the next morning, I was traveling on a train with my translator further south to a university. We had another talk. And she said this to me. She said, "I want to apologize that I disappeared," because there was no one there to translate when I was signing books and stuff. She said, "But here's the deal, I'm a lesbian. And while you were talking there, that last question, I could hardly translate at all. The top of my head was coming off," she said, because I'd never heard a theologian, much less a priest, talk that way before. Yeah. And she said, "As soon as you finished, I went to the bathroom and I cried for an hour."
I bet.
Which was really something, because this was a professional woman, very strong,
Sure.
in her mid-30s. But wow, the power of homophobia.
Oh, it's so stifling, Dr. Fox. I mean, to have people stick up for us, to know who our allies are, is huge. And I fear so many people are walking around in shame, afraid of who they are. And I love hearing that Native American culture embraced the sexuality, homosexuality. It also embraced being transgender, because we go back, we're called Two-Spirit, and that's what the Native Americans referred to us as Two-Spirit. And we were seen as the leaders and the sages to make the wise choices. And of course, there were tremendous responsibilities, but also some privileges, some balances. So.
Well, definitely, and appreciation for the gifts that come to the community through people like yourself and others. And and I think, I was telling you this in the car, I think your biography that you lay out in your book, short that it is, that you've suffered so many things. First of all, with violent parents, and then being in a mental hospital and all that, and being treated that way, and of course being on the streets and all of it, and then going through your own sexual identity as well. Then I think part of it has been an initiation into shamanism for you, that your leadership, including having a program like this, I think comes out of a deep spiritual place. And I should say I praise you for having the courage to step up and deliver and share with the community. It's just what the Native people say, that transgender people and gay and lesbian people have a special gift for the community, and the gift is spirituality, essentially. And a homophobic culture or church is, as I say, shooting themselves in the foot. They're depriving themselves of spiritual energy.
I think, I agree, and to even extend that, I think, that if we cut ourselves out from people who are differently abled, immigrants and refugees, anyone with any diversity, we're hurting ourselves. We really are.
Clearly, I mean, you look at American history, and its better side has been welcoming people of so many backgrounds, and so many of them have gifted us with so much. An awful lot of Silicon Valley inventions have come from immigrants.
That's a good point.
And so that's just the latest story. But, and we are all immigrants unless you're Native American.
Right. And you're here, another issue that to me is front and center, and I'm so glad you're here. It is our environment. It's in trouble. I mean, we've made some poor choices, and we are wreaking havoc, whether it's due to self-loathing or that we really just don't comprehend what the consequences are. I think 98% of the world's scientists agree we're in trouble. And we need to double up, triple up, what we need to do to take care of the environment. So.
Well, absolutely, and the bottom line is, I think, that we live in such a world, a human-centered world, anthropocentric, what Pope Francis has called narcissistic. That we're not realizing the pain that we're delivering on other creatures, whether we're talking about the waters or the soil or the forests, or the elephants and tigers and the fishes and all of it. But you're right, it's the scientist's job to gather the facts. And it's clear that the earth is extremely sick. It's now a hospital. and of course climate change. Now, I was invited to a conference a year and a half ago in Florida about the rising seas and climate change. And this was in January of last year. At that time, Florida had 3 significant politicians, 2 of them running for president, and 1 the governor of Florida. All 3 were in complete denial publicly about climate change. But at this conference, it began with the scientist who got up and showed slides of Florida. He said, 10 years from now, chop. Then he showed a slide of 20 years from now, chop, chop. 30 years from now, chop, chop, chop. Florida is going under.
Yes.
And you have 3,
Yeah.
Bush, Rubio, and the governor in complete denial.
Right.
And I went to South Miami. There's 6 inches of water in the
I know,
sidewalks.
yeah.
And it's not just about getting your feet wet.
No.
When salt water rises and then flushes down our freshwater tables, we're done.
Yes.
As a species, you can't grow plants
No.
and everything else. So, and what do you do with sewers and all that? So, it's uncanny that humans can choose denial about so important a topic, and that we have, frankly, at this time, it seems, a whole party in America
Right.
that is committed to denial. Even though, now it's interesting, Al Franken last week, I don't know if you heard this, the Democratic senator said behind closed doors in the Senate, Republicans will admit climate change.
Really?
Yes. But that's even more pathological.
Yeah, I was just going to say.
Because in front of the doors,
Right.
they're doing nothing and denying it.
Right.
So this is complete hypocrisy.
Yes.
It's schizophrenia.
Yeah.
And it's a sign that our politics are absolutely, off the chart.
I hear from people saying, Matthew, it's just evolution. This happened years ago and stuff. And I guess my answer is, evolution took thousands of years.
Exactly.
This has taken a few hundred, and it's a very accelerated evolution.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's not taking a few hundred now. It's going to take a couple of decades.
Yeah. Yeah.
And ask the people in Greenland. I just learned from a scientist this week. I've been in a science conference out on Star Island with scientists and a few others, and one of them said, they're now grazing cattle in Greenland. Greenland used to be all ice.
Right.
So, and talk, of course, to people from the islands, of the Pacific Islands. These islands are being abandoned.
Yes.
Because the salt water is taking
Just
over the
rising.
freshwater tables, and so these are the canaries in the mine.
Yeah.
And then, of course, just check the weather patterns.
Yeah.
I just came from California a week ago, and we had the hottest 10 days in recorded history. And this was in June.
Yes.
And then the number of hurricanes, and it's all going to get worse.
Yeah.
Because of climate change. Yeah. So, again, humans, we're an amazing species, but it's not all good news.
No.
We're capable of so much denial, living in our own worlds.
Yeah.
And I think Pope Francis, who wrote a very fine encyclical on ecology called Laudate Si, I think he's absolutely right. It's a narcissism of our species.
Yes.
And anyone with moral instinct at all ought to be shouting and marching and demanding change.
Right.
And if
we need to be stewards of this earth, that we're, as the natives would say, we're borrowing from our children, our grandchildren, and we're not thinking with that in mind. It's just a very immediate gratification. Whatever we want, it will pay for the consequences later. And we're paying for them now.
That's right. And later is going to be worse if you don't shift. I really like Naomi Klein's book. This is It. The subtitle is Capitalism versus Climate. But she did a tremendous job of interviewing all kinds of groups around the country, including indigenous groups, that are doing very positive work at the grassroots.
Okay.
And so it's very important to keep our hope up on this and to realize that many people are aware, many people are doing a lot. Just 2 days ago, I think 300 cities, mayors of 300 cities in America said, we're going to commit to the Paris Accord.
Oh, wonderful.
And we're going to make things happen. So in a way, it may be in kind of a perverse way that the president pulling out of that accord we'll get grassroots groups
doing more,
yeah. and taking responsibility. Because this is not something we can just expect to solve from the top.
Yeah.
And a lot of corporations are smart enough, and even the Defense Department knows all about climate change. You know, like they were saying that this week, these scientists, that they've been quizzed by the Navy. Because of course the Navy deals with water. And as the seas rise, and they know it's rising, everything's going to change for the Navy. Where are they going to park their ships?
That's true.
The piers are underwater, all that practical stuff.
Yeah.
So I mean, the president can prattle on about whatever illusions he's living under, but those who live in reality, I mean, he lives on a tower, you know, with
so
gold.
Removed from the average.
So removed.
Yeah.
But even he will be affected when the air is no longer
breathable.
Clean, breathable, and water is hard to find, and the rest. So it's a pitiful situation, but it is shedding light on the pathology of our civilization.
Yeah, I can imagine, because in so many ways, people who are wealthier can be removed about some things. But you know, the environment doesn't discriminate. When it has a hurricane, it doesn't care that you're living in a penthouse.
Exactly.
You know,
that's right.
And you know, I really feel, I've heard people make really careless statements like, well, you know, the earth is going to poop out anyways, or, but you know what, the earth is going to survive. It's us that aren't.
That's right. And we're bringing down a lot of other species with us.
Yes.
Which is
that have
pitiful.
No say in any of this.
No say in any of it. They haven't voted for Trump or anyone else.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're, you know, people do make up excuses.
Yeah.
But more and more people are waking up. And of course, we do have a lot of creativity as a species. There's a lot we can do. And I mean, you know, in India, they have a car that runs on air.
I've wondered about
good.
Like solar cars. Why not?
And more solar, and the batteries that go with it, and all that. But we're not going to be saved by technology alone. We have to change our consciousness.
Yes.
We get out of our anthropocentrism and our narcissism, and realize we're in kinship with all these other beings, and the Earth is an interdependent system, as you said, and we have to respect that. There's a web that we're part of here, and it's all sacred. See, that's what I think is the thing that's most missing, that we've been taught to see the world in a utilitarian way, the earth, as something we're going to exploit and make money from, but not as a relative. And the whole tradition of Mother Earth, and it's interesting, it's not only a Native American theme, but it's interesting that Pope Francis brought it into his encyclicals. He's kind of adapted that language as, you know, as a Christian. And that's important, that we recover the sense of relationship. Everyone who grows a garden knows they're in relationship with the earth.
Well, I find this interesting. You know, I just want to emphasize to people, it's not a bumper sticker, it's a fact that we are interconnected, and thinking that we can oppress the environment or a group of people or certain plants or animals, it does impact us.
Absolutely.
You know, if nothing else, the potential of another human being that never gets developed, that could benefit us, you know, if you want to look at it from an ego point of view.
Well, that too.
Yeah.
But, you know, we say we love our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, but we don't. If we're not working, that their life will have healthy air, soil, water, and numerous diverse species to delight and instruct them.
There's so many
it's a
going
complete
instinct.
lie if we're not actively involved. Just don't give me that nonsense that you love your children, because it's a lie.
It is.
And an illusion.
Yeah. You know, and as much as we complain about winter, for example, I can't imagine a world without having some snow. But I don't think our children are going to enjoy that. That's one of the things that's going to be gone. I've read that recently, you know. There's so, and the species that are just becoming more extinct, they're not going to enjoy these things that you and I, for now, get to take for granted.
That's right.
So I agree. If you love your children, if you love yourself, you're going to show that with the environment. So.
Yeah,
I do know, on a personal note, once President Trump pulled out, I woke up redoubling my efforts. I thought I was doing a fairly good job, and I guess I expected the government to take care of business. But you know what, they're not, and it is definitely up to us to step up to the plate post-haste.
Well, exactly, as you say, to double our efforts. And I think, you know, there is a lot of that going on.
It
the fact
is.
that 300 mayors got together
Yes.
and committed themselves
Yeah.
is you know, is significant, I think.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Is there anything I should have asked you that I did not?
Oh, I didn't have any agenda.
But you have a new institute in Colorado evolving.
Yes, right. I had my own university called the University of Creative Spirituality for 9 years in Oakland, California.
Yes.
But now graduates of my program are starting, and I left that several years ago, and I worked with the inner city kids using our same pedagogy, which was so effective with adults. And it really worked. These kids are dropping out of school. And I learned they're dropping out because they're bored.
Yeah.
Not because they're dumb.
No.
Our
Opposite.
education is dumb.
Yeah.
The kids aren't.
Right.
But so my practice was to bring creativity in to the inner city kids. And when we did, we took a poll, 100% wanted to stay in school. Why? Because they felt the joy of learning. The joy of learning is missing in a lot of our educational system. But yeah, so now graduates of my program are starting their own university, but with the same pedagogy that I initiated in the past. And they call it the Fox Institute for Creative Spirituality. I had nothing to do with the title, but they're in charge, not me. But I will teach in it. And they offer a master's degree in spirituality, creative spirituality, and a doctor of ministry degree, and also a doctor of spirituality degree. And it's an intensive thing. So you come for 1 or 2 weeks at a time. So it's not about moving to Colorado.
Yeah, so you don't have to relocate.
Exactly, it's not that. And then within a year, they'll have some classes, not all, I think no more than 40%, online as well. And they're trying to keep the costs down and all the rest.
Oh, wonderful.
But I think it's really special and important because we need a spirituality today for the very reason, things we're talking about.
Yeah.
You have to be strong. You know, spirituality is about warriorhood.
It's not for wimps.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And so we need to be intellectually strong as well as, if you will, psychologically and spiritually. So we purposely train both left and right brain, the intuition, which is mysticism, because we want to create mystics and prophets, and the left brain that is intellectual and rational. By the way, there's something else I'm involved in if you want to hear about it.
I want to hear, I do.
I got a dream 2 years ago, and it woke me up at 4 in the morning, and it said, "Do it," with exclamation points. What was the it? To start a new religious order that isn't a religious order, but a spiritual order.
Okay.
It's not beholden to any one religion or headquarters, religious headquarters.
Wonderful.
But it's built around what we're talking about, ecology, because the name of the order would be the Order of the Sacred Earth, OSE.
Oh,
And there's one vow that would bind the community together, and this is the vow. I promise to be the best mystic, that is lover of Mother Earth, and the best prophet or warrior defending Mother Earth that I can be. That's the one vow. And you can be Christian or Jewish or Buddhist or
Doesn't
Hindu
matter.
or atheist
Yes.
if you agree with this value system.
Yep.
And I have 2 33-year-olds running it, because this is about the younger generation. This is a generation that has to step up,
Yeah.
but they need support from elders and others.
Yes, sure.
And so I see it as being intergenerational. There'll be older people in it,
Sure.
but the young have got to lead, and they should be empowered to lead. And we're launching it. We're putting out a short book called Order of the Sacred Earth. And I've written a 40-page essay, and then one of these young people has, and then we have about 20 people writing very short essays, like 2 pages, in response. Some of them names people would know, like David Corton and Brian Swim, the cosmologist, Mirabai Starr, and so forth. But some young people who don't yet have big names. But this book will come out this fall. But we're excited about it. When I bounced it off people, especially young people. One 26-year-old, she said, "This is exactly what our generation needs." She said, "We're so dispersed by social media and distracted, but to have something to focus on, this is it." She said, "We need a focus." And that's what a vow is, obviously.
Yes. Yes.
So, but again, I learned the lesson from history that when I look at the history of the Christian church, it has often had times like today when its energy is run very low, when it's not in good shape. But at such times, usually an order popped up.
Yeah.
The 3rd century had the Desert Fathers and Mothers.
Yep.
That was a new movement.
Yes.
In the 6th century, had St. Benedict and Scholastica starting the monastic system. In the late 12th and early 13th century, you had St. Francis and St. Dominic starting their orders. In the 16th century, I think the Protestant Reformation was in many ways a birth of lay orders. And then you had St. Ignatius starting the Jesuit order. But I looked around today and there's nothing happening. And so I say, well, but we should learn the lesson that St. Francis did not want his order to be controlled by the Vatican.
No.
But they took it away, and then he died 2 years later, I think, of a broken heart.
I believe that, yeah.
Within a generation, the Franciscans were running the Inquisition, as was the Dominicans. So we got to learn from the shadow side here.
Yeah.
That it shouldn't be beholden to any religious headquarters. And I think we're ready for this today because of the great gift of religious diversity that we are all able to profit from today. So we want to launch this thing and see what happens.
I wish you all the best on that.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So you take anyone. So you all heard that. Atheists, Buddhists, Native American, Judaism, welcome here, as long as they will uphold the vows.
That's right. And you can remain in your own tradition, of course.
Sure.
Right, right.
Well, you can't
uphold
beat
the
that.
vows.
Yep.
Exactly.
And now,
support one another.
Absolutely, yes. And I believe you have another book on the way, is that correct? Because I bought something, Stations of the Cross.
So Stations of the Cosmic Christ.
Can you tell us a little bit about that? I haven't had the chance to break it open yet. So.
Oh, okay. Well, the archetype of the Cosmic Christ is returning. Carl Jung says that archetypes return when they're needed.
Yes.
And this is an ancient archetype. It's the oldest writings in Christianity talk about the Cosmic Christ. Paul's letters and the Gospel of Thomas, both written about the same time, before the other 4 Gospels. And so this is an ancient teaching, but we really lost it because of our anthropocentrism and narcissism. But Paul says, for example, Christ holds everything together, the heavens and the earth. Now there's a parallel concept in Buddhism, the Buddha nature. And it's about the sacredness. The Cosmic Christ is about how every being is another Christ. And the Buddhist teaching is every being is another Buddha. And in Judaism, every being is an image of God, not just humans, but every being. So it's about recovering the sacredness of all beings. And again, this is a bit basic to all ecology, I think, if you're going to develop a spiritual ecology. And so I had another book out this year on Thomas Merton, the great Catholic monk, who
got you in a lot of trouble.
Who got me in a lot of trouble, because I wrote him when I was a young Dominican and said, where should I go to get a doctorate in spirituality? He said, go to Paris, the Institut Catholique in Paris. And so I did, and there I met my mentor, Père Chanou, a French Dominican, older man, and he named this creation spiritual tradition for me. So yes, I think I can say Merton got me in all my trouble. So
thank you, Merton.
I thank him and bless him for making life not uninteresting.
Yes, yes. Well, to go back to the Buddha nature you were talking about, I have a good friend named Tom Hendel who said a meditation that he uses is that he will, I am, and then every single thing he comes into contact, I am the table, I am the plant, I am. So that you see the sacredness of everybody if you are. And I find that fascinating. That's how God answered, right? I am.
Exactly, and that's part of the 16 stations. 7 of them are the I am sayings. You know, I am the good shepherd, I am the door, I am the resurrection, the life, and so forth. These are not Jesus talking. Jesus didn't talk that way, the historical Jesus. Right. This is a cosmic Christ, which is to say the vision that the community had immediately after Jesus died and left. And so you can flip it. The question is, in what way are you a door? You are, I am the door. How are you a door? Right. How am I a door? Right. How are we good shepherds? And at this time of ecological crisis, it's very close to being a good steward. Shepherds care about the sheep. They have to. Sheep are very vulnerable. And so you go through all, how are you a light to the world? So it's a marvelous practice. So there's the Stations of the Cross in Catholic churches and Episcopal churches. But these stations, and they are about the last 20 hours of Jesus' life.
Okay.
The undergoing the
Sure.
Pilate and his death and all that. But these stations are about the great stories around Jesus, because they're all set in the Gospels around cosmology, including Bethlehem and the Nativity, including John 1, in the beginning was the Word, including the baptism of Jesus. We're told the sky opened up.
Right.
You know, that's kind of cosmic.
Yeah, I'd say so.
You'd say so. Transfiguration, when he went up to the mountain and they saw his radiance.
Yeah.
And even the crucifixion is not set in any of the Gospels in terms of this private thing about how I nailed Jesus to the cross and my sins did it all. It's set in a cosmic context. One Gospel says, you know, even though it was midday, there was a lunar eclipse, etc. Or another Gospel that earthquakes happened and people came out of the grave. Or another one that the temple veil ripped.
Yeah.
And yet we know at that time that veil had a picture of the cosmos on it. It was a universe that split. So and then the resurrection, the ascension, Pentecost, all these are set in a cosmic context, but we've lost the power because we've reduced them to psychology.
Yeah.
And there's not the power there that is to be found in cosmology. So this is part of the cosmic Christ. So this is a practice, and we have these two artists who created these icons. And now they're available in a two-dimensional form. One version is aluminum. You can put them on your church walls, your chapel wall, whatever. And the other is actually a high-quality paper photograph. You can put in an 8 by 10 inch frame, and again put it up on the walls. And so you walk. It's like a mini pilgrimage. You walk from station to station. You pause and you meditate on each. And another thing you can do in churches would be to have young people, children, maybe one group, teenagers another, young adults another, create their own stations. You know, in other words, it's a way to invite artists back to healthy religion, to make religion healthy again. There's an artist in Italy who's done her stations, for example, these 16 stations, and they're hanging in a monastery now in Italy, in an outdoor cloister. Yeah.
And it helps revive that ritual we've lost so much of.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah. We need ritual so
we
much.
We do need ritual.
Get out of our heads.
I feel a personal appeal to ritual. It's just, we've lost it, and I think that we're kind of just floundering a bit, you know. Other cultures, especially indigenous cultures, you know, you go through these and it does move you to the next phase, and I almost can't help but wonder if that's part of what's going on. We've lost so much of that.
Well, that's right, and all healthy ritual connects you to the universe, you see. It's not just about psychology, it's cosmology.
Yeah.
Just think, for example, of Stonehenge. You know, these people, thousands of years ago, before the invention of the wheel, got out of their couches and dragged literally tons of rocks to a place. Why did they do that? What motivated them? It was the solstice and the equinox. Yeah. It was our relationship to the cosmos.
Yeah.
And so if we're looking to get energy back, and, you know, get out of couch potato-itis and eating potato chips till we die. Ritual is look at Burning Man out in California. 65,000 people come out in August in the desert. I mean, crazy. If they were reasonable, they'd go in March, but no, August. But that just shows the appeal of ritual, because people are hungry today. Is, you know, frankly, Western religion today has pretty much rendered ritual dead.
Yes.
It's all about reading prayers and getting on the right page. And, you know, the eyes, you know, Rilke, the poet, said this. He said, the work of the eyes is finished now. Go and do heart work. And all the images repressed within you. So, and of course, real ritual includes a body, as Native people know, of course. They wouldn't bring a book to prayer. They dance. And they sweat. You don't
Yes.
bring a book into a sweat lodge.
No, and that's a purifying thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I've even wondered on some level, because I smoked for 20-something years, and we all went out and huddled, and I can't help but wonder even if smoking was a form of our little fires. We had our little fires, we'd huddle around speaking, and that's what we used to do, is have big fires and talk with each other and dance and things. So.
Well, yeah, when people don't get rituals from the culture, they do make their own.
Dysfunctional ritual.
We get dysfunctional ones.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, and drinking and even drugs. There's a search for a high. There's a search for ecstasy and for transcendence, even in that. But it's not a very healthy way to go.
No,
it's a rule.
Not.
Yeah.
And I thought I read somewhere, or maybe I heard it from you even at the retreat, that you had worked with youth with raves. They were doing with raves.
Years ago, I realized we have to reinvent worship and liturgy and bring the body back.
Yep.
And that in the last 20, 30 years, new languages have been developed, such as rap, new art forms, rap, DJ, VJ. Why wouldn't these be used in worship?
Sure.
It's sacred technology, you might call it. So we started what we call these rave, some people call rave mass, and it was in Sheffield, England that it began.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I know you spent time in Sheffield, England. That's where it began, and I met these people. They flew over to Seattle to meet me at a conference, and I was very impressed by what they were doing. And so we adapted it in America our own way. But and then that's when I became an Episcopal priest. The Pope fired me, and then I became an Episcopal priest. And I told the Episcopal Bishop of San Francisco, I want to do it for only one reason: to work with young people to reinvent forms of worship.
Wonderful.
We've done over 100 of these masses now. We call it the Cosmic Mass, and like we did it in the World Parliament a year ago in Salt Lake City, and there were 400 people in the room, and 200 more were banging on the door to get in, but there was no room. So
you don't usually see that in church.
No, you don't. No, we did it at University of Colorado years ago. There were 1,400 people in the big ballroom there, and it really is time. And again, I have young people in their young 30s directing the Mass, and overseeing it, and of course I'm there too as an elder. But we want to see this catch fire too.
Okay.
And I think it's overdue, really.
Absolutely.
I think we need it, and all kinds. Like we did it for 1,000 people in a Sounds True conference a year ago in the mountains of the Rocky Mountains near Boulder, actually. And there were atheists, there were Buddhists, there were rabbis, there were Christians of all denominations. And it was really powerful for everybody. And afterwards, an atheist, this woman came up, she said, I am an atheist, a fierce atheist. I'm so fierce that when I walk down the street and there's a church, I cross the street to go. But she said, when we did this grieving thing, because we always include grieving, it's such an important part of ritual today, it's so needed. She pointed to her heart. When we did the grieving, something happened in here, she said. She said, by the time communion came along, I had to have some. She said, this night has transformed my life forever, she said.
Wow.
So, we've had a lot of happenings at these masses, so I know that it's
I love how you have the balance, because one thing in your retreats, you've invited Ellen Kennedy and you do sacred circle dancing. And as a result of that, I myself have gone to many sacred circle dances, and I do feel that is so important. And so, young people are yearning for it, middle age, all of us, we need it, we want it, craving it.
That's right. And ritual, when you look at indigenous people, it's a marvelous way of bringing together the generations. And we need that intergenerational sharing and wisdom today.
Yes.
Wisdom comes from the young and wisdom comes from the old.
Absolutely.
And we need spaces and forms in which this can happen together. And so, there's a lot that we can be doing today.
Absolutely, and you're still doing it. You don't believe in retirement the way that we do, right?
No, I talk about retiring the word retirement.
Yes, I know.
And replace it with refirement and rewirement.
Right, repurpose.
Repurposing, refirement, rewirement. Yeah, that happens when you get older. And of course, there are a lot of older people today. We're living longer.
Yeah.
And they have a lot to give. We shouldn't put them on shelves, and we shouldn't put them all in one place like a ghetto.
No.
With only playing canasta and going golfing.
Yeah.
That's not, young people need elders, and elders need young people.
And you know what? No matter who you are, you need purpose.
That's
You need
right.
purpose.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, meaning.
Yeah.
And there's, as we talked about, there's so many needs out there that no one can be sitting this out.
No.
All hands on deck
Yeah.
if we're going to survive,
Yes.
because the ecological crisis is a wake-up call.
Yes, it is. Yes, you don't get to opt out on that one.
Exactly.
Unfortunately,
Yeah.
or fortunately, maybe.
Yeah.
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 Yes. I've so enjoyed this discussion with you, and I really want to thank you for being in Maine and giving this much-needed talk tonight. So.
Well, thank you, and thank you for your invitation.
Thank
I enjoyed
you.
the talk too.
Thank you. Well, viewers, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope that you learned a lot, and it's unfortunate I can't air this before this evening's speech that Dr. Fox is giving, but you are hearing the interview, and please know that our environment is in trouble. Let's make some choices to help her out. So thank you so much for your time and your interest. Have a good night.